Hi, welcome to Calicut University's 4th semester BA BSc Common Course paper, Spectrum, Literature and Contemporary Issues. This paper is an attempt to make an awareness in the learners about the global social issues like the hazards of globalization, xenophobia, racism, and cruelty towards the marginalized, and so on. So, this paper is divided into 4 sections. The first module, entitled Literature and Media, it's about the interaction between literature and media in the contemporary period. The second module consists of a short story and a poem that portray the issues of globalization and IPR. IPR means intellectual property right. And the third module is an exploration of the theme of nation and its boundaries. And the last module is about the various marginalized groups and their rights. Let us begin with the first module. The first module is entitled as Literature and Media. It has 2 papers, and the first one is 2 chapters. The first one is a speech. Actually, this article is an extract from a speech made by Amanda Michaelopoulou. The title of this speech or the article is Divided Times, How Literature Teaches Us to Understand the Other. We know that this is a time at divided times. We have been divided by many things like caste, class, religion, nation, and പല രീതിയിലുള്ള ഡിവിഷൻസ് നമുക്കിടയിൽ നടന്നുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നുണ്ട് അല്ലെ. കാലം തന്നെ പല രീതിയിൽ ഡിവൈഡ് ചെയ്യപ്പെട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. So how literature in this divided times, how literature teaches us to understand the other. എങ്ങനെയാണ് സാഹിത്യം നമ്മളെ മറ്റുള്ളവരെ അപരനെ മനസ്സിലാക്കുന്നതിൽ നമ്മെ എങ്ങനെ സാഹിത്യം നമ്മെ സഹായിക്കുന്നു, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ആ സാഹിത്യത്തിലൂടെ നമ്മെ എങ്ങനെ പഠിക്കുന്നു എന്നുള്ളതിനെ കുറിച്ചാണ് ഈ ഒരു സ്പീച്ചിൽ Amanda Michaelopoulou പറയാൻ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. Second one is Komala. Komala is a discussed or widely discussed short story written by Santosh Echikara. So now let us move to the first chapter or first article, Divided Times, How Literature Teaches Us to Understand the Other. So the author, I'll just give you a short introduction about the author, Amanda Michaelopoulou. She was born in Athens, Greece in 1966, and she has published 6 novels, 3 short story collections, and many children's books. And she has received a lot of awards, and her stories, novels, and essays have been translated into 10 languages. So in 2013, her novel Why I Killed My Best Friend, which was published by Open Lecture, was widely received one. It was a widely received novel, and this essay or this article is extracted from the opening speech of the 2nd International Literature Festival of Odessa and translated from Greek by Karen Emmerich. So I'll just give you a few themes which are discussed in this article. The role of literature to understand the difference and to encourage the sympathy. So എന്താണ് സാഹിത്യത്തിൽ നമ്മളെ റോൾ എന്താണ്, മറ്റുള്ളവരെ മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ, അപരനെ മനസ്സിലാക്കുന്നതിലും നമ്മളിൽ സിമ്പതി ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്നതിലും ഒക്കെ സാഹിത്യം വഹിക്കുന്ന പങ്ക് എന്താണ്. ആൻഡ് second one is rereading of classics from a new perspective. So according to Amanda, it is the right time to reread and deconstruct the classical literatures and find out new texts and experiences that reflects the contemporary realities from it. And she points out that we should deconstruct the classical literature and find out new texts that reflects the contemporary realities from it. And another important thing which is discussed in this essay or this article is how classical authors have created heroes who were able to challenge the perceptions of the dominant class. So most of the heroes which are mentioned in this essay are from the classics are anti-heroes. They are not actually the so-called heroes. They are anti-heroes. They have a lot of flaws and limitations, but at the same time, they can give. So, അവർക്ക് എന്ത് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റിയിട്ടുണ്ട്? നമുക്കിപ്പോൾ വീണ്ടും ഇപ്പോൾ ഒഡീസി അത് ഇവിടെ ഈ ഒരു എസ്സേയിൽ അവർ മെൻഷൻ ചെയ്യുന്ന പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ക്ലാസിക്സ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ഗ്രീക്ക് ക്ലാസിക് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഹോമറിന്റെ ഒഡീസി, ഷേക്സ്പിയറിന്റെ വളരെ ഫേമസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള പ്ലേ ഹാംലെറ്റ് ആൻഡ് ഡോൺ കിക്സോട്ട്, സോറോ ഓഫ് യങ് വെർദർ, ഇതൊക്കെയാണ് അദ്ദേഹം അമാൻഡ ഇവിടെ ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. സോ ആ ലിറ്ററേച്ചറൊക്കെ നമ്മളെ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ദിസ് ക്ലാസിക്സ് എന്ത് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും, നമ്മൾക്ക് പുതിയൊരു പോയിന്റ് ഓഫ് വ്യൂവിൽ വായിക്കാനും പുതിയ അർത്ഥങ്ങൾ അതിൽ നിന്ന് കണ്ടെത്താനും സാധിക്കും എന്നാണ് അത്. ആൻഡ് വി ക്യാൻ റിലേറ്റ് their issues, it can be related to contemporary issues such as war, plight of refugees. നമുക്ക് അറിയാം ഒഡീസിയുടെ കഥ. ഒഡീസ്യൂസ് ട്രോജൻ വാറിന് ശേഷം വലിയൊരു തിരിച്ചു നാട്ടിലേക്ക് എത്തുന്നതിന് മുമ്പ് അദ്ദേഹം അഭയാർത്ഥിയായി പലയിടങ്ങളിൽ അലഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഒരുപാട് രാജ്യങ്ങളിൽ അഭയാർത്ഥിയായി അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് തങ്ങേണ്ടി വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് ആ ഒരു എക്സ്പീരിയൻസിനെ നമുക്ക് ഇപ്പൊ എങ്ങനെ റിലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും? ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ റെഫ്യൂജീസിന്റെ നമുക്കറിയാം ഒരുപാട് പശ്ചിമേഷ്യയിലും മറ്റു പലയിടങ്ങളിലും പല രാജ്യങ്ങളിലും ഒക്കെ തന്നെ പല രീതിയിലുള്ള പലായനങ്ങളും യുദ്ധത്തിനെ തുടർന്നിട്ടുള്ള റെഫ്യൂജീസിന്റെ ഒഴുക്കും യൂറോപ്പിലേക്കുള്ള ഒഴുക്കൊക്കെ നമ്മൾ കണ്ടു കഴിഞ്ഞതാണ്. അത്തരം വാർത്തകളൊക്കെ അത് നമുക്ക് ഈ ലിറ്ററേച്ചറിനുമായിട്ട് കണക്ട് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ നമുക്ക് അത്തരത്തിലുള്ള പുതിയ ന്യൂ ടെക്സ്റ്റ്, പുതിയ പാഠങ്ങൾ നമുക്ക് അതിൽ നിന്ന് വായിച്ചെടുക്കാൻ കഴിയും. And also, literature can give space to the people who are marginalized from the mainstream society. നമ്മുടെ മെയിൻസ്ട്രീം സൊസൈറ്റിയിൽ നിന്ന് മാർജിനലൈസ്ഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മാറ്റി നിർത്തപ്പെട്ടിട്ടുള്ള മനുഷ്യരുണ്ട്. കാസ്റ്റിന്റെ, ക്ലാസിന്റെ, റേഷ്യൽ ഡിസ്ക്രിമിനേഷന്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ട് സാമ്പത്തികമായ ശേഷിയില്ലാത്തതിന്റെ പേരിലൊക്കെ തന്നെ മാറ്റി നിർത്തപ്പെട്ട ജനതയ്ക്ക് വോയിസ് നൽകാൻ ആർക്ക് സാധിക്കും? ലിറ്ററേച്ചറിന് സാധിക്കും. അതിനുള്ളൊരു പവർ ലിറ്ററേച്ചറിനുണ്ട് എന്നാണ് അമാൻഡ ഈ പ്രസംഗത്തിലുടനീളം സൂചിപ്പിക്കുന്നത്. നമുക്കറിയാം ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് ജനറലി ഡിഫൈൻഡ് ആസ് ദ റിഫ്ലക്ഷൻ ഓഫ് സൊസൈറ്റി. സോ ഇറ്റ് റിഫ്ലെക്ട്സ് വാട്ട് ഈസ് ഹാപ്പനിങ് അറൌണ്ട് us. സോ ലിറ്ററേച്ചർ ഹാസ് സച്ച് എ പവർ. ആ ഒരു പവർ എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഉപയോഗിക്കേണ്ടത് എന്നാണ് അദ്ദേഹം ഈ ഒരു ആർട്ടിക്കിളിൽ പറയാൻ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്, സ്പീച്ചിൽ പറയാൻ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. അവർ കുറെ ക്യാരക്ടേഴ്സിനെ ഇവിടെ ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. ക്ലാസിക്കൽ ഹീറോസിനെ ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. ഒഡീസി എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഗ്രീക്ക് ക്ലാസിക്സിനകത്തുള്ള പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ക്യാരക്ടറായ ഒഡീസ്യൂസിനെ കുറിച്ച് അദ്ദേഹം ഇവിടെ ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. അവർ ഇതിൽ ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. നൗസിക്ക ഇസ് ഫ്രം ഒഡീസി ആൻഡ് ഫിനീഷ്യൻസ് പറയുന്നത് പീപ്പിൾ റിസൈഡിങ് ഇൻ ദ ഐലൻഡ് ഓഫ് Phaeacians എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് people residing in the island of Phaeacia, and Ithaca, the island home of the hero Odysseus. And another character is taken from Shakespearean play Hamlet. Hamlet'inagathunna Claudius, the Hamlet's brother, King Hamlet's brother, a new king of Denmark, and Gertrude, mother of Hamlet. And another important text which is quoted here is Don Quixote, a Spanish novel by Miguel de Cervantes. Don Quixote is the hero of that novel. Another one is Sorrow of Young Werther. It's an autobiographical epistolary novel by Goethe. Werther is the central character. And Lotte, Werther's love interest. Lotte is fall in love with a girl. Her name is Lotte. ആൻഡ് മോഡേൺ ക്ലാസിക്സിൽ നിന്ന് അവർ മെൻഷൻ ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു വർക്കാണ് പോർട്രേറ്റ് ഓഫ് ദ ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റ് ആസ് എ യങ് മാൻ, എ സെമി ഓട്ടോബയോഗ്രഫിക്കൽ നോവൽ ബൈ ജെയിംസ് ജോയ്സ്. ആൻഡ് സ്റ്റീഫൻ ഡിഡാലസ് ഇസ് ദ പ്രൊട്ടഗോണിസ്റ്റ്. സോ ഓൾ ദീസ് ഹീറോസ് ആർ മെൻഷൻ ഹിയർ ആസ് marginalized anti-heroes. So they reminds us the contemporary world realities faced by the marginalized people such as caste inequalities, racial discrimination and war refugees. കാസ്റ്റ് ഇൻഇക്വാലിറ്റീസ് ഉണ്ടാകുന്ന ദളിതരായിട്ടുള്ള മനുഷ്യർ, റേഷ്യൽ ഡിസ്ക്രിമിനേഷന് വിധേയരാകുന്ന ബ്ലാക്ക് പീപ്പിൾ ആൻഡ് വാർ റെഫ്യൂജീസ്, ഇവരൊക്കെ ഇങ്ങനെയൊക്കെയുള്ള മനുഷ്യരെ നമ്മൾ ഓർമ്മിപ്പിക്കുന്നുണ്ട് ഈ ക്ലാസിക്സുകളൊക്കെ എന്നാണ് അമൻഡ ഈ ഒരു സ്പീച്ചിൽ ഊന്നി പറയുന്നത്. ഓക്കെ, now let us discuss a very famous short story, Komala, written by സന്തോഷ് ഏച്ചിക്കാനം. സന്തോഷ് ഏച്ചിക്കാനത്തിനെ കുറിച്ച് ഞാൻ അധികമൊന്നും പറയേണ്ട ആവശ്യമില്ല. സൗത്ത് ഇന്ത്യയിലെ ഏറ്റവും പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട ഒരു റൈറ്ററാണ്. മലയാള ലിറ്ററേച്ചറിൽ അദ്ദേഹം കാസർഗോഡുകാരനാണ്. കാസർഗോഡ് ഡിസ്ട്രിക്റ്റിലാണ് അദ്ദേഹം ജനിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളത്. ആൻഡ് ഹിസ് സ്റ്റോറീസ് ആർ down to earth and speaks about the common people. So he received the Kerala Sahitya Academy Award for his short story Komala 2008. Komala, it's a short story published in Madhubhumi Weekly. So the context of this short story is globalization. Due to the globalization, we witness lot of numerous the farmer suicide in Kerala due to the economic crisis. So globalizationന്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു എക്കണോമിക് ക്രൈസിസിന്റെ ഭാഗമായി ഒരുപാട് ഫാമേഴ്സിന്റെ മരണം നമ്മൾ കണ്ടു കഴിഞ്ഞു. സോ ആൻഡ് another important thing which is discussed in this short story is the insensitivity of media in taking up such issues. Komala, the title is borrowed from is the name of a town from the dead in Johan Rolf's novel Petro Parama. Petro Parama എന്ന് പറയുന്ന യുവൻ റോൾഫോന്റെ നോവലിനെ ബേസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ള ആ നോവലിനകത്തുള്ള ഒരു പ്രദേശത്തിന്റെ പേരാണ് കൊമാല, മരിച്ചവരുടെ നഗരം എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ആ ഒരു ടൈറ്റിലാണ് അദ്ദേഹം ഈ ഒരു നോവലിന് ഷോർട്ട് സ്റ്റോറിക്ക് വേണ്ടി സ്വീകരിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളത്. കൊമാല, the novel draws the picture of an inhuman mob and the suffering of common people. But our story, this Komala, is rooted to a situation in Kerala, unveil the attitude of people who have become selfish and self-centered as the dead people in the town of Komala. So the title makes sense and meaning. So the protagonist of this novel is Kundur Vishan, who decided to commit suicide on August 15 due to bankrupt. The thing is that behind his decision, അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ ആ ഒരു തീരുമാനത്തിന്റെ പുറകിലുള്ള ഒരു കാരണം, ഹിസ് ഫ്രണ്ട് സുധാകരൻ borrowed 50,000 rupees with Vishan standing surety. Sudharan didn't pay the money and Vishan was cheated. So when this ഈ ഒരു സിറ്റുവേഷൻ ഉണ്ടായ സമയത്ത് താൻ ഓഗസ്റ്റ് 15 മരിക്കാൻ പോവുകയാണെന്ന് തീരുമാനിച്ച് ഒരു ബോർഡ് തന്റെ വീടിന്റെ മുന്നിൽ കെട്ടിത്തൂക്കുന്നതോടുകൂടി he got media attention. The media discussion does absurd and make no difference in Vishan's life. ആൻഡ് മീഡിയ ഡിസ്കഷനകത്ത് വളരെ അബ്സേർഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങളാണ് നടക്കുന്നത്. നോബഡി ഡിസ്കസ് ദ റിയൽ ഇഷ്യൂ, നോബഡി ഡെയർ ടു ടേക്ക് അപ്പ് ദ റിയൽ ഇഷ്യൂസ്. ബട്ട് ദെയർ വളരെ ഫേക്ക് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഡിസ്കഷനിലേക്കാണ്, വളരെ അബ്സേർഡ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഡിസ്കഷനിലേക്ക് പോവുകയും ആൻഡ് ആഫ്റ്റർ ദ ഡിസ്കഷൻ അദ്ദേഹം എൻഡ് ഓഫ് ദ സ്റ്റോറിയിൽ നമുക്ക് കാണാൻ കഴിയുന്ന ഹി ഫൈൻഡ്സ് എ മാൻ met with an accident and he find himself fortunate that he could serve the last drop of water to that person. And ആ ഒരു ഇൻസിഡന്റോടുകൂടി മരിക്കാനാവുന്ന ഒരു മനുഷ്യന്റെ വായിലേക്ക് ഒരു തുള്ളി വെള്ളം എത്തിക്കാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞ ആ ഒരു പോയിന്റിൽ, ആ ഒരു മൊമെന്റിൽ he realizes the value of life, the meaning of existence, and his purpose of life was fulfilled by giving the last drop of water to a dying man. Then he goes back home and throws away the suicidal board. The author exposes the hypocrisy of the news channels and the dramatization of the real life situation of the common people commodified. ഇതാണ് ഈ ഒരു ഷോർട്ട് സ്റ്റോറി ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. എങ്ങനെയാണ് മനുഷ്യന്റെ ജീവിതം കൺസ്യൂമർ ഒരു ലോകത്ത് മനുഷ്യന്റെ ജീവിതം കമ്മോഡിഫൈഡ് ചെയ്യപ്പെടുകയും ചരക്കുവൽക്കരിക്കപ്പെടുകയും എല്ലാം ഒരു വാർത്ത മാത്രമായി തീരുകയും യഥാർത്ഥ ഇഷ്യൂസിനെ ആരും അഡ്രസ്സ് ചെയ്യാതിരിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നു എന്നുള്ള ഒരു സന്ദേശമാണ്, ഒരു മെസ്സേജാണ് ഈ ഒരു വർക്ക്, ഈ ഒരു ഷോർട്ട് സ്റ്റോറി നമുക്ക് നൽകുന്നത്. Now we will be discussing Module 2, Globalization and IPR. So before going to the prescribed text, let us discuss or let us know what is globalization and what is IPR and all. So globalization is a process by which national and regional economies, societies and cultures have become integrated through a global network of trade, communication, immigration and transportations. So in a globalized world, the world turned to become a global market. So market where globalization is particularly significant. The globalization of sport and entertainment is also a feature of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. So it's a part of new economic policies actually. New economic policy യുടെ ഭാഗമായിട്ടാണ് ഗ്ലോബലൈസേഷൻ ഇന്ത്യയിലൊക്കെ നടപ്പിലാക്കുന്നത്. The policy which consisted of globalization, liberalization and privatization was aiming at the integration of markets in the global economy. So it makes a lot of changes in the lifestyle and our culture and in our way of thinking and all. So another important thing which is discussed here is IPR. IPR stands for Intellectual Property Rights. അപ്പോൾ ഒരു വസ്തുവിന് മേലുണ്ടാകുന്ന പാറ്റന്റ് നിയമങ്ങൾ, ഒരു വസ്തുവിന് അതിന്റെ ഭൗതിക സ്വത്തവകാശം ആർക്കാണ് എന്നുള്ള ഒരു ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ വരുന്നുണ്ട്. പലപ്പോഴും നമുക്കറിയാം ബഹുരാഷ്ട്ര കുത്തകൾ നമ്മളുടെ പല മെഡിസിനൽ വാല്യൂ ഉള്ള പ്ലാന്റ്സ്, മറ്റു പല വിത്തുകൾ പോലെയുള്ള സംഗതികളിലൊക്കെ പാറ്റന്റ് അവരുടേതാക്കി മാറ്റിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. അപ്പം ഒരു കാലഘട്ടം അത് ഉൽപ്പാദിപ്പിക്കാനും അതിന്റെ പ്രോഡക്റ്റുകൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കാനുമുള്ള അവകാശം ആ ഒരു പെർട്ടിക്കുലർ പാറ്റന്റ് ഉള്ള കമ്പനിയിൽ നിക്ഷിപ്തമായിട്ടുണ്ട്. സോ ഇതൊക്കെയും നമ്മുടെ സാധാരണ മനുഷ്യരുടെ ജീവിതത്തിൽ ഒരുപാട് ചേഞ്ചസ് ഉണ്ടാക്കിയിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഈ ചേഞ്ചസ് റിഫ്ലക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്ന സ്റ്റോറീസും ഒരു പ്ലേയുമാണ് നമ്മൾ ഈ ഒരു മോഡ്യൂൾ സെക്കൻഡിൽ ഡിസ്കസ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. മോഡ്യൂൾ സെക്കൻഡിൽ വി ഹാവ് എ ഷോർട്ട് സ്റ്റോറി by N.P. Hafiz Muhammad. The title is The Big Fish. The Big Fish is a short story in Malayalam, which is a translation of the short story entitled Cheriya Meenugalum Valiya Malsyavum. It portrays how this new economic policies affects the life of ordinary people. It is a critique of globalization and elucidates its offer of new prospects to the third world underprivileged people, but it in turn destroys the traditional systems and way of life. So major themes of this story, The Big Fish, by N.P. Hafiz Muhammad. Before going to discuss this story, I'll just give you an introduction about, or just a short description about the author N.P. Hafiz Muhammad. He was born in 1956 as a son of N.P. Muhammad, a well-known Malayalam writer and former president of Kerala Sahitya Academy. He is a sociologist, writer, illustrator, corporate trainer and family counselor. And this story is translated into English by Dr. K.M. Sharif, the head of the Department of English, Calicut University, and one of the most renowned translators in Kerala. Okay, the story, The Big Fish, Valiya Malsyavum, is a story discusses the effect of globalization, which is how this new economic policies affects the life of ordinary people. So നമ്മൾ അതിന്റെ തീംസ് പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് എടുത്തു നോക്കുമ്പോൾ the first one is the effect of globalization in the life of common folks. Second, the consumer culture, how consumer culture has been making a lot of changes, in our life and our way of thinking, our lifestyle and all. The intervention of multinational companies into the local market. Namukariya, we have seen lot of Reliance Trends and some other more kind of multinational companies are everywhere. Even നമ്മുടെ ഒരു ചെറിയ വില്ലേജിൽ പോലും we can see their outlets and all, their supermarkets and all. So അത് നമ്മളുടെ ലോക്കൽ മാർക്കറ്റിന് എന്തൊക്കെ എഫക്റ്റ് ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്നു, ലോക്കൽ മാർക്കറ്റിൽ നമ്മൾ സാധാരണക്കാരനായ ആളുകളുടെ, ഇപ്പം നമ്മുടെ നാട്ടില് ഒരു പിന്നെ മസാലപ്പിടി അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു സാധാരണ പലചരക്ക് കട നടത്തുന്ന നാരായണേട്ടന് കച്ചവടം ഇല്ലാണ്ടാവുകയും അപ്പുറത്തെ റിലയൻസ് പോലുള്ള കുത്തക കമ്പനികളുടെ മാർക്കറ്റിൽ സൂപ്പർ മാർക്കറ്റുകളിലേക്ക് ആളുകൾ ഓടിപ്പോവുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നു. ഇതുണ്ടാക്കുന്ന വലിയ ഒരു പിന്നെ മാറ്റമുണ്ട് നമ്മളുടെ സമൂഹത്തിൽ. നമ്മളുടെ ലോക്കൽ ഇക്കണോമി മുഴുവൻ തകരുകയും വേൾഡ് മൾട്ടിനാഷണൽ കമ്പനീസ് അവിടേക്കൊക്കെ കടന്നു കയറുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നു. ഈ ഒരു മാറ്റത്തെ സൂചിപ്പിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ടാണ്, ഇതെങ്ങനെയാണ് ഒരു സാധാരണ മനുഷ്യന്റെ ജീവിതത്തിലേക്ക് എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഈ മൾട്ടിനാഷണൽ കമ്പനീസ് കടന്നു വരുന്നത്, അതുണ്ടാക്കുന്ന മാറ്റങ്ങളെ കുറിച്ചാണ് ഈ ഒരു സ്റ്റോറി പറയുന്നത്. The main characters are in this story. Characters in this stories are Alasan Kutti, an ordinary man who owns a pond, a happy-go-lucky person. He is so happy with his small pond, and he used to talk with the fish, and he used to chat with his little fishes in the pond, and he's quite happy as he enjoyed what he did. And Mariam, his ambitious wife, and the agent, the representative of a multinational company, and the big fish, a symbol of multinational companies. ഇവരാണ് ഇതിനകത്ത് മേജർ ക്യാരക്ടേഴ്സ്. Okay, the story, in this story, the protagonist of the story, Alasan Kutti, owns a pond, and one day, an agent wearing a hat with the stars approaches him and explains the possibilities and profits of fish farming, and suggests him to be wise. So then his wife also persuade him to do according to the suggestions of this man, this agent. And later Alasan Kutti decided to go on with a new plan of joining the fish growing collective. And he cleans and disinfects the pond and put big fish into the pond. Slowly he finds that the small fishes are eaten by the big fish. The big fish is getting fatter by eating the small fishes. Alasan Kutti gets disturbed by the act and worries about small fishes, to which he has affection and love. Then he slowly realizes that the big fish turns as a monster and engulfs all the little fishes remaining in the pond. And actually, the big fish in the story symbolizes the multinational companies who came to India after the implementation of new economic policy in 1991. So the metaphor of the fish is a very original and competent one to explain the traps and tricks of globalization. And the story exposes the influence of globalization in the lifestyle and in the food habit of natives, and shows how the critics of globalization are treated by the state and police. So through this a translation, the story Big Fish successfully retains all the traces of its localness along with its serious thematic focus. വളരെ വലിയൊരു സബ്ജക്റ്റാണ്. ഒരു ചെറിയ കഥയിലൂടെ അദ്ദേഹം വളരെ വ്യക്തമായി കാണിച്ചു തരുന്നത് എങ്ങനെയാണ് മൾട്ടിനാഷണൽ കമ്പനീസ് നമ്മളുടെ ലോകത്തെ വിഴുങ്ങുന്നത് എന്നുള്ളത്, നമ്മളുടെ സംസ്കാരത്തെ, നമ്മളുടെ കൾച്ചറിനെ, നമ്മളുടെ ഹാപ്പിനെസ്സിനെ ഒക്കെ ഇല്ലാതാക്കുകയും നമ്മളൊരു കൺസ്യൂമർ സൊസൈറ്റി ആക്കി മാറ്റി തീർക്കുകയും ചെയ്യുന്നതിനെ കുറിച്ചിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു കഥയാണ് The Big Fish. Then let's move to Turmeric, a poem written by K. Sachidanandan. It's a poem translated from Malayalam. The Malayalam title is Manjal. you know what is manjal or turmeric. Manjal and medicinal values. We know that it's an integral part of our life. Manjal നമ്മുടെ ജീവിതത്തിന്റെ ഒരു പ്രധാന പാർട്ടാണ് അല്ലേ. We put it into the curries and we used to smear it on our faces and we know that it's a cosmetic. It has a cosmetic value. So here മഞ്ഞളിന്റെ പ്രോപ്പർട്ടി റൈറ്റ് നമുക്കറിയാം. പാറ്റന്റ് ഒരു മൾട്ടിനാഷണൽ കമ്പനി ഏറ്റെടുക്കുകയുണ്ടായി. അതിന്റെ അവകാശം അത് വിത്ത് ഉൽപ്പാദിപ്പിക്കാനും അത് കൃഷി നടത്താനും അതിനെ കൊണ്ട് പ്രോഡക്റ്റുകളൊക്കെ ഉണ്ടാക്കാനുള്ള ഒരു അവകാശം മൾട്ടിനാഷണൽ കമ്പനികൾക്ക് തീരെ എഴുതി കൊടുക്കുന്ന ഒരു അവസ്ഥയുണ്ടായി. ആ സമയത്താണ് ഇത്തരം ഒരു പോയം വരുന്നത്. സോ it discusses the impact of globalization on our culture and how intellectual property rights and patent laws monopolizes our traditional seeds and plants. Turmeric, we know that it's a medicinal plant and a traditional cosmetic powder. We used to make cosmetic powder from turmeric. It's a part of rituals and has used in every occasion such as marriage, childbirth, etc. So it has the cultural and medicinal values. Now it turns into a mere cosmetic product of MNCs sold in tubes and bottles. So here Sachidanandan wants to say that or points out that we are actually our manjal or our turmeric now an expensive cosmetic cream trapped in tubes and sold in the supermarkets. The word trap denotes how the traditional weight of the turmeric is taken out and how it is forced into a new identity. And the term is rich enough to suggest all the cultural implications that are facilitated by the new market-based approach of the multinational cosmetic companies through their unjust IPR and patent laws. So, turmeric is left as a mere cosmetic product. It has lost its traditional and cultural values. And this is shown in this poem, The Turmeric. The last work in this module is, last poem in this module is What Work Is by Philip Levin. So in this poem, Philip Levin, as a leading American poet, born and brought up in an industrial background, worked in a factory. So he was a proletarian or he was a factory worker and he knew the value of work. And he became, or through his poems, he gave voices to the workers and the marginalized people. And his famous works, major works are They Freed, They Lion, What Work Is, and The Mercy. And What Work is a biographical poem, reflects the miseries of factory workers. The poem begins with the first person plural we. We represents the workers who are waiting for work at Ford Highland Park. Ford Highland Parkil ജോലിക്ക് വേണ്ടി വെയിറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്ന വർക്കേഴ്സിനെ റെപ്രസെന്റ് ചെയ്യുന്ന വാക്കാണ് we എന്ന് പറയുന്ന plural. First person plural. And the poet addresses the reader as you. He creates empathy in the reader towards the workers in this poem. And this poem actually, what he wants to say is that, this poem clearly shows how the workers are alienated from the work and how they are treated by the capitalists. The whole poem has a tone of great desperation and loneliness. And it echoes the miseries of working class who have never enjoyed the colors of life and happiness. In the concluding line, the poet says that the reader cannot affiliate with his working class brother, not because of his or her inability to express their emotions, or they're jealous or even mean or incapable of crying in the presence of others, but they're total ignorance about what work is. നമ്മളെ പോലെയുള്ള ഒരു മിഡിൽ ക്ലാസ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അപ്പർ മിഡിൽ ക്ലാസ്സിലുള്ള മനുഷ്യർക്ക് എന്താണ് വർക്ക് എന്നുള്ളതിന്റെ ആ ഒരു യഥാർത്ഥ മീനിങ് നമുക്കറിയില്ല. വി കനോട്ട് നമുക്ക് ഒരിക്കലും എന്ത് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റില്ല, അത് അതിന്റെ യഥാർത്ഥ അർത്ഥം മനസ്സിലാവില്ല, ബിക്കോസ് നമ്മൾ അത്തരം ഒരു അനുഭവത്തിലൂടെ പോയിട്ടില്ല. സോ ലെവിൻ ആസ് എ റൈറ്റർ ഫ്രം പ്രൊലറ്റേറിയൻ ക്ലാസ് അക്കംപ്ലിഷ്ഡ് ഹിസ് ഗോൾ ഓഫ് ഗിവിംഗ് വോയിസ് ടു ദ വോയിസ്ലെസ്. ഇദ്ദേഹം പറയാൻ പറയാൻ സാധിക്കുന്നത് നമ്മളെ പോലുള്ള റീഡേഴ്സിന് അത് മനസ്സിലാവാഞ്ഞിട്ടല്ല, മറിച്ച് നമ്മൾക്കത് നമ്മളുടെ ഇന്നബിലിറ്റി അല്ല, മറിച്ച് നമ്മൾക്കത് എന്താണ് യഥാർത്ഥത്തിൽ വർക്ക്, അധ്വാനം എന്നുള്ളത് നമുക്ക് മനസ്സിലാവില്ല. കാരണം നമ്മൾ ജനിച്ചു വളർന്ന ഒരു അന്തരീക്ഷം വ്യത്യസ്തമാണ് എന്ന് ഉറപ്പിച്ചു പറയുകയാണ് ലെവിൻ ഈ ഒരു പോയത്തിൽ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. സോ ഇത് നമ്മൾ വോയിസ്ലെസ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള മനുഷ്യർക്ക് വോയിസ് നൽകുന്ന, അദ്ദേഹം ഒരു പ്രൊലറ്റേറിയൻ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ വർക്കിംഗ് ക്ലാസ്സിന് വോയിസ് നൽകുന്ന ഒരു പോയമാണ്. അവർക്ക് വേണ്ടി എഴുതപ്പെട്ടിട്ടുള്ള പോയമാണ് വാട്ട് വർക്ക് ഈസ്. എന്താണ് വർക്കിംഗ് ക്ലാസ് എന്ന് സാധാരണ റീഡേഴ്സിന് വളരെ കൃത്യമായി അദ്ദേഹം മനസ്സിലാക്കി കൊടുക്കുന്നുണ്ട് ഈ ഒരു പോയത്തിലൂടെ.
Module 3. Module 3 begins with a poem called Home by Warsan Shire. Now, Warsan Shire is a Kenyan poet who wrote Conversations About Home in 2009. Conversations About Home is a piece of work which was inspired by a visit that the poet made to an abandoned Somali embassy in Rome. Now, some young refugees had turned this abandoned embassy into their own homes, that is, into an asylum, because they were not in their own homes. Now, this visit was an eye-opener to Warsan, to the harsh realities of living as a refugee in Europe, especially without any document. So, this piece, that is, Conversations About Home, the partner of work, becomes the basis of the poem that we are about to study, that is Home. Now, the main theme in Home is the trauma and the abuse that is faced by migrants and asylum seekers who run away from their own nation and their own homes in order to going and living in some place that provides them more safety and comfort or security. Now, the poem begins as no one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. So, nobody wants to leave their houses. Why do people leave their houses forever? Nobody wants to do that. But you're forced to run out of your homes here. You run somewhere else, maybe to another country. The word used here is border. You only run for the border. So border might be a reference to another country or another nation. So you're forced to run out of your country, out of your homes, because of a threat at your own home, because of a threat at your own nation. So the last line, when you see the whole city running as well, last line in the first stanza, refers to, you're doing this, it refers to the fact that you're running away from your home also because there seems to be no other option left. You're not in your right mind, so you just do what everybody else is doing. When you see the whole city running as well, you also do that because you don't have any other option and because you're not in the right mind to think about any other option as well. So you just want to run away from danger, and the only option you are left over here is to run away from your own homes. Now, the second paragraph, your neighbors running faster than you. You see that all around you, people are running. People you know, people you don't know, everybody is running. And the people you know, that maybe people who you loved once, even they have turned against you. So everybody, the boy you went to school with, who kissed you dizzy behind the old tin factory, maybe the same person you loved once turns against you now, is holding a gun bigger than his body. So everybody, all those people who you once thought you knew, who you were close to, who you loved, maybe these people have turned against you, and they have weapons in their hands. They're holding guns in their hands, guns or weapons or anything, which they can't, which is so big that even they can't handle it by themselves. Now, all of a sudden, home or your nation, the place that you're living in, it's turned into some dangerous place where you don't even recognize, where you can't even differentiate between people who you loved or people who you know and don't know. So you've become so desperate that you have no option but to run away from your home. You only leave home when home would let you stay. There is a sense of desperateness here. Now, in the third paragraph, no one leaves home unless home chases you. Fire under feet. So, imagine a situation where there's fire under your feet. What do? You don't remain in the fire, you obviously run from that. So, fire under your feet also symbolizes the urgency to leave from that place, from your nation, from your home. You simply can't stay, you just can't risk staying back anymore. There's no choice left now. There's hot blood in your belly. Now, hot blood in your belly might be a reference to the terribly uneasy feeling that you have, that the feeling that you get in your stomach when something bad is going to happen, or when you're scared, when you know that something is, something dangerous is coming. ആ ഒരു ഉള്ളിലുണ്ടാവുന്ന ആ ഒരു ഫീലിംഗ് ഉണ്ടല്ലോ നമുക്ക്, like you get that feeling in your stomach, in your tummy. A feeling of uneasiness. So that hot blood in your belly might be a reference to that kind of feeling. Now, you never expected that home എന്ന് പറയുമ്പം what do we connect it with? Home എപ്പോഴും, വീട് എപ്പോഴും we connected, we associated with comfort, with safety, with love, security, family. ഇങ്ങനത്തെ കാര്യങ്ങളായിട്ടാണ് നമ്മൾ എപ്പോഴും അസോസിയേറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. ബട്ട് ഹിയർ ഇൻ ദിസ് പോയം അത് റൈറ്റ് ഓപ്പോസിറ്റ് ആണ്. It's completely against you. Home has turned against you. But now that your neck is so close to being cut off, still you try, like you're very near to death. Okay, you're very near to having your neck being cut off. Appadum you try to stay true to your own nation and your identity. But anthem might be a reference to patriotism or your identity as a citizen. Okay, so even when the blade burnt threads into your neck, even when you're so close to death, the anthem is there under your breath. Okay, but then it's not, you're not saying the anthem out loud, it's under your breath. So you're trying, there is a struggle to hide your identity. You try staying true to your nation, but still you're struggling to hide your identity and hide your nationality. Only tearing up your passport in an airport toilet, sobbing as each mouthful of paper made it clear that you wouldn't be going back. Now, you have no option left. ഇനി ഒരിക്കലും വീട്ടിലേക്ക് തിരിച്ചു പോകാൻ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങളുടെ കൺട്രിക്ക് തിരിച്ചു പോകാനുള്ള ഒരു ഓപ്ഷൻ ഇല്ല. അപ്പം വാട്ട് ആർ യു ഡൂയിങ്? നമ്മൾ ആ കൺട്രിയിൽ നിന്നാണ് എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോഴാണ് നമ്മൾ അൺസേഫ് ആവുന്നത്. അപ്പം ആ സേഫ് ആവാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് you're trying to eat up your own passports. This symbolizes that you're trying to hide your own identity, your identity as a citizen. Okay, your origin, which country you originate from, you're trying to hide that fact. And then you're sure that you won't be able to go back. Your country is yours no more. So you just try to gulp you try to eat your passport down. But with each mouthful, when you're trying to eat also, you're crying because you don't want to do it. You want to belong to your nation, but you don't have any option to do that. Now, the fourth paragraph, everybody, you have to understand that nobody puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than land. Now, everyone has to understand that we are leaving home, that is, migrants are leaving home only because they are left with no other choice. It is necessary for survival now. It is necessary for being, for staying alive. Otherwise, who would put their own kids on a boat when land is always considered safer than water? But now it's right the opposite. Every time we say വെള്ളത്തേക്ക് പോകണ്ട, ഇപ്പം സ്വിം ചെയ്യാൻ പോലും കുറേ പേരൻസ് വിടുന്നില്ല, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പേരൻസിന് സ്വിം ചെയ്യാനും പഠിക്കാനൊക്കെ വിടാൻ പേടിയാണ്. എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ്? everybody is scared of water. വാട്ടറിൽ ഇറങ്ങിക്കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ water is considered as unsafe, and land is always considered more safer than water in comparison. Okay, but here it's right the opposite. You're leaving your children, you're putting your children on board so that at least they might escape from this from all the atrocities that are taking place in your own home or in your own nation. So basically, no one wants to do what they're doing, but they're forced to do it. They're forced to hide under train carriages. They're forced to go and hide inside trucks. They're forced to stay hungry for days. So over here, in the lines where you're talking about, no one spends days and nights in the stomach of a truck feeding on newspapers unless the miles traveled. So you're very hungry, but then you still want to hide inside trucks or beneath train carriages. Wherever you find a place to hide, you try to hide yourself. So why are you doing this? In order to survive and stay alive. But meanwhile, you're feeding on newspapers. And then feeding on newspapers because ഇപ്പം ഈ COVID-19 കാലത്തും you can relate that to this. What do we do? Every day morning, you try, or every day morning you try to get your hands on the newspaper to see how many new cases of coronavirus are there in your in your place, in your state, or in your country, or around the world. You're curious about that. You're anxious about that. You need to know whether community spread has started in our state, in our locality. You want to know all that in order to stay safe. നമ്മളെ സേഫ് ആക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ടും കൂടിയാണ് ആ ഒരു ആങ്ഷ്യസ്നെസ് വരുന്നത്. അപ്പം സിമിലർലി ഇവിടെയും ദേ ട്രൈങ് ടു ഗെറ്റ് ദെയർ ഹാൻഡ്സ് ഓൺ ന്യൂസ് പേപ്പേഴ്സ് ടു നോ വാട്ട് ഈസ് ഗോയിങ് ഓൺ ഇൻ ദെയർ കൺട്രി, വെദർ ദ സിറ്റുവേഷൻ ഇസ് ഗെറ്റിംഗ് ബെറ്റർ. ഹോപ്പ് ഉണ്ടോ, നമുക്ക് എപ്പോഴെങ്കിലും തിരിച്ചു പോകാനുള്ളൊരു ഹോപ്പ് ഉണ്ടോ, അതോ do we are we like are things worsening, are things going into worse situations? So you even you don't mind crawling under fences. ഇങ്ങനെ ബാക്കിയുള്ളവരുടെ വീട്ടിൽ പോയിട്ടാണെങ്കിലും അവരുടെ വാളിൻ്റെ അപ്പുറത്ത് നിന്നിട്ട് ഒളിച്ച് നിന്നിട്ടാണെങ്കിലും എങ്ങനെയെങ്കിലും ജീവിച്ചിരിക്കുക എന്നുള്ളൊരു എയിമേ ഉള്ളൂ. യു ജസ്റ്റ് വാണ്ട് ടു സർവൈവ്. സോ യു റിസ്ക് ബീങ് ബീറ്റൺ അപ്പ് ബൈ അതേഴ്സ്, ബട്ട് യു സ്റ്റിൽ ഡോണ്ട് വാണ്ട് ടു റിട്ടേൺ ടു യുവർ ഓൺ home. Now, in the next stanza, the poet says that people end up in refugee camps. They don't choose refugee camps. They end up there, and they searched and they felt all over their tired and aching body. Now, the term strip search here, used over here, it refers to searching for concealed items by removing all the victims, the migrants' clothes. So, this might also be an allusion to sexual abuse faced by the migrants. And then the poet goes on to say that it is better to handle one prison guard. It's better to be in prison. It's more safer than your home. It's more safer than other places as well, because in a prison you have to handle only one prison guard, but otherwise you might have to handle many men coming and many men together. It has undertones of sexual abuse. And then the poet goes on to say that nobody is tough enough, or no matter how strong you feel you are, nobody is tough enough to tolerate or bear all that a migrant goes through. Now, in the next paragraph, that is in the 5th paragraph, the poet talks about all the insults, the hate speech that the migrants face. Like, for example, calling them blacks, calling them dirty immigrants, asylum seekers, savage, and they even blame them for making their own country messed up. They also give them dirty looks. Dirty looks might be a reference to potential rapers or sexual abuse, or men lusting after the migrant's body, mostly referring to the female migrants' torture. And then the poet ends the stanza by saying that no matter the migrants find these dirty looks, these insults, these hate speeches and all softer, softer in the sense it's more of a light blow, rather than having one of your organ cut off, or rather than having yourself killed. So they bear all these because this is somehow better than being dead. In the next stanza, the poet depicts gender-based violence, especially against the female migrants, which they have to face during the journey, as well as in the asylums or the supposedly safe places where they reach. So the line 14 men between your legs may be a direct reference to gang rape or all the sexual abuse that is, the non-stop sexual abuse that one has to go through when you're a migrant. But then you bear and tolerate all this just to stay alive, just to keep your child alive, breathing in his body, so that he is not blown into pieces. Again, in the next stanza, the poet depicts that the migrant badly wants to return home to the safety that it once provided, but then home has turned into the mouth of a shark, the barrel of the gun. It's turned into that, and it's turned into something as dangerous or threatening as going into the mouth of a shark. So then you have no options. Again, repetitions of the lines we've discussed before. Finally, he also talks about all the difficulties and dangers of the journey that the migrant undertakes in order to reach the refugee country or the asylum. And they are going in hope of finding a safer place to live in, but even the journey itself may be fatal for them. The journey isn't an easy one. It might be dangerous. And these migrants, while they are on this journey, they have no food or no access to basic amenities, so they become so hungry that they forget all their pride and they start begging. In the final stanza, the poet sums up the entire message by saying that you don't know who you are now. You have reached such a state. You have lost your nationality, your identity, your ego, and everything. But then anywhere is still safer than home. So anywhere else is still considered safer for the migrant. So next we'll be discussing a short story by K.K. N. Daruwala titled Love Across the Salt Desert. This is a love story which about two lovers from two opposite sides of the international border between India and Pakistan. The two main characters are Najib Hussain and Fatima. Now, Najib Hussain is described as a shy and not so courageous boy. Now, the whole setting of the short story is taking place in the Thar Desert or the Kutch Desert, which is full of salt lagoons and it is considered as one of the hottest deserts. There are no water bodies there and hence it's very difficult to cross without help. He usually crosses it with Zaman or else with his father accompanying him. He has never done this alone. But then here, now we see Najib Hussain changing from this shy and not so courageous boy into a brave person who crosses this desert by himself in order to reach Fatima because he promised her that he would return to her. So usually Najib's father takes tendu leaves or tobacco leaves across the border and he sells it, and instead he buys spices from Kale Shah. Kale Shah is the father of Fatima. He is a spice seller. Now it is on such an occasion that once Najib and his father are forced to stay at Kale Shah's house, and that is when Najib and Fatima meet and they fall in love. Now Fatima is the beautiful daughter of Kale Shah, who is described as being somebody who looks like a fairy, and she always smells of cloves and cinnamons. Now she is engaged to Mahfouz Ali, a person with a stammer and slurred speech, who people in the village make fun of. So she's obviously not happy about this engagement, and when she meets Najib, she falls for him. Now Najib has to return after the selling and the buying process takes place, but then he promises to come back, and this is how he becomes the brave person that he becomes through the story. After a lot of difficulties, the whole journey forms a major part of the story. And after a lot of difficulty, he finally reaches Kale Shah's house and he meets Fatima, and he takes her back also. Now, it must be noted that in Najib Hussein's village back in India, there was a drought going on. So this might be a symbol of the thirst that the protagonist, that is and Najib have for each other. Now, this drought comes to an end, and then rain starts falling down onto the earth when Fatima steps into the village of Najib Hussain. And when Najib returns home, his father asks him whether he has brought anything useful back with him. And Najib shows him Fatima. And this conveys that she is worth more than anything he could have ever brought across the border. So the entire story conveys the power of true love and how it has the power to change people. Like for example, you find that how much Najib has changed from the not so brave boy into such a brave person who has the strength and courage to cross the Kutch Desert all by himself. Next is a poem by James Kirkup titled No Men Are Foreign. Now, this poem basically conveys the idea that all divisions, that is, divisions like nation, caste, color, creed, religion, all these are baseless. There is no meaning in it. അപ്പം അതിനെ ബേസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടാണല്ലോ ഇങ്ങനത്തെ ഡിവിഷൻസിനെ ബേസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടായിരിക്കും വാർ നടക്കുന്നത്. സോ ഈവൻ ദീസ് വാർ, സിൻസ് ഡിവിഷൻസ് ആർ മീനിങ്ലെസ്, വാർ ഇസ് ഓൾസോ മീനിങ്ലെസ് ആൻഡ് ദർ ഇസ് നോ ബേസ് ഫോർ ഇറ്റ്. There is no need for it. So the first stanza, let's look at the first stanza. The speaker asks us to remember that no man is a stranger and no country in the world is foreign. Nobody is different. Everyone has similar bodies that breathe and live the same way, be it beneath a uniform or not. There's no difference. In short, the poet conveys that all human beings are equal despite of belonging to different countries and cultures. We walk on the same earth and we are buried in the same earth after death. So there is no difference between people. In this next stanza, the poet talks about how the life forces, that is air, water, sun, are the same for everybody. Everyone is fed by the same harvest and everyone starves by the same winter's war. Basically, the poet is conveying that everyone has gone through good and bad days. Everybody prefers peace to wars. All of us work hard and struggle for our survival. Everyone works to feed themselves as well as their families. In the next stanza, the poet depicts that we must always remember that other people have eyes just like ours. Or in short, we wake and sleep in the same manner as everyone else. Our body parts function just the same way as everybody else's. Everybody shares a common trait. Everybody shares common traits. In the next stanza, the poet says that we are all the same in so many aspects. So when we are told to hate someone, we must remember that it is equal to hating ourselves. It becomes a futile fight against ourselves. So let's stop taking weapons against each other. Let's stop making wars against each other. In the final stanza, the poet says that we are the ones who are damaging the earth. That is, with our hatred against each other, we damage the earth, we destroy it, and we ruin the innocence in the air. And remember that this air is our own air, that is, everybody shares it. So when we are damaging the innocence in the air, we are damaging ourselves. On the whole, the basic message that the poet is trying to convey is that we all are equal and that wars are meaningless. There is no need for a war. The next poem is by Paul Celan and it is titled as Death Fugue. Now, it was written in 1948 after Paul Celan, the poet, escaped from the Nazi labor camp. It is written in the fugue form. Fugue is a musical composition in which the main idea or phrase is systematically repeated throughout the poem. That is, ഏതെങ്കിലും ഒരു പാട്ടിലോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു പോയമിലോ ഒരു മെയിൻ ഐഡിയ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഒരു മെയിൻ ഫ്രേസ് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അത് പിന്നെയും സിസ്റ്റമാറ്റിക് ആയിട്ട് റിപ്പീറ്റ് ചെയ്യുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ദാറ്റ് ഇസ് നോൺ ആസ് എ ഫ്യൂഗ്. സിസ്റ്റമാറ്റിക് ഇൻ ദ സെൻസ് അവിടെയും ഇവിടെയായിട്ട് റെപ്പിറ്റേഷൻ വരില്ല. ഇപ്പോൾ ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ 2 lines കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടാണ് റെപ്പിറ്റേഷൻ എന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ത്രൂ ഔട്ട് ദ പോയം ആ ഒരു 2 lines കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ട് തന്നെ ആയിരിക്കും. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ 4 lines കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടാണെങ്കിൽ ത്രൂ ഔട്ട് ദ പോയം ഇറ്റ് വിൽ ബി ആഫ്റ്റർ 4 lines. So it is in a systematic manner, that repetition of that idea or phrase is in a systematic manner. That is what a fugue is. Now, the speakers of this poem are Jewish prisoners. The poem is composed of 6 irregular stanzas. And through these 6 irregular stanzas, the speaker's perspective on a Nazi concentration camp is depicted. It must also be noted that there is no punctuation between the thoughts, and this symbolizes the deterioration of the speaker's consciousness as he reveals the cruel acts carried out on those who are condemned to death. It must also be noted that both of the poet's parents were murdered in a concentration camp, and he himself was taken to a forced labor camp. So, throughout his life, he was haunted by his parents' death and his own struggle for survival. Now, we'll get on into the poem. In the first stanza itself, the poet depicts the time and place that the death camp is taking place in. Now, the phrase black milk of morning, it sounds like a disgusting rather than a nourishing drink. Milk is actually supposed to be nourishing, but here it's depicted as right the opposite. The prisoners get it over and over again throughout the day, and this is a symbol of the unnourishing life of a concentration camp. This repetition of this drink is a symbol of the inescapable oppression that these prisoners go through. They are also given the task of digging up mass graves. കുറേ graves ഇങ്ങനെ dig ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ് upon the order of a Nazi guard. And this guard, Nazi guard or the Nazi officer is described again in the stanza itself. So you get a character of the officer as well, who is in charge of the grave diggers. What does he do? How is he? He keeps snakes and he rides to Germany. So Germany might be his native land, and that means that the concentration camp is not taking place in Germany. It is somewhere outside Germany. And he is writing it to a golden-haired lady called Margaret. Now Margaret, again, it invokes the love, maybe that the officer is in love with this particular golden-haired Margaret. Now the phrase stars all start indicates night, the beginning of night. Also, it symbolizes Star of David. Star of David is a symbol which is used to identify Jewish prisoners. And then what does the officer do? He whistles for his dog as well as for his Jewish prisoners. This also shows that he treats both his dog as well as the prisoners in the same manner. Now stanza 2 opens with the same image of black milk, and but there's a shuffling in the timing of the drinking. That is, we drink you at night, we drink you in the morning, at noon we drink you at sundown. So here it starts in the first stanza, it starts with sundown. Here it begins with night. So that is the only shuffling that takes place. Otherwise it's the same, it's the repetition. Now golden-haired Margaret again is contrasted or paired with ashen-haired Shulamith. Now, Shulamith is considered as the ideal of Jewish femininity because she was the female protagonist in the Song of Songs in the Hebrew Bible. Now, this line about Shulamith, it sort of blurs into a repetition of the line about the grave in the sky. Now, her ashen hair resembles ash and smoke, maybe because many of the victims of the Holocaust were not buried. They were rather burned or cremated. Now the officer commands them again to dig, while others are commanded to sing and play. He tugs at his sword and he swings it. And swinging it, that is waving it, might refer to killing someone. Now the officer's blue eyes as well as Margaret's golden hair, both these things, the blue eyes and the golden hair, it calls attention to the Nazi concept of racial purity. It shows that they're different from the grave diggers. Now in the next stanza, it begins again by the repetition of the first 3 lines of the poem. Again, the time is shuffled again. The images of Margaret and Shulamith are intertwined, or they're connected with the image of the snakes, which is associated with the German officer. Again, in the next stanza, phrases from the previous stanza are clubbed together, but in a sort of disoriented manner. Here the officer is connected with death, or he is considered as equal to death. The term, he may be an officer, but he may be death himself. Now, the shooter or the officer, his aim is always accurate. It doesn't move here or there. Now, the officer sets his dogs on the other prisoners, giving them a grave in the sky. In the final stanza, again, both the golden haired Margaret and Shulamit are brought in. They are both representatives of German and Jewish identities. That is, Margaret stands for German identity, and Shulamit stands for Jewish identity. So both these identities are contrasted at the end of the poem. Hi, today we'll be discussing Spectrum, Literature and Contemporary Issues, Module 4. Before we begin this module, we had left one topic uncovered in the previous module, that is Module 3, which is Jamaican Fragment. Jamaican Fragment is a personal essay written by A.L. Hendricks. It is written using the first person narrative, and hence it is commonly believed to be a true life experience. This personal essay deals with issues of race and universal brotherhood, which is brought out in the essay in an ironic and humorous way. Now, the story in short is that the narrator goes out on a regular walk from his house to the tram car lines, and now he finds something strange on the way. He finds a 5-year-old black boy playing with a 4-year-old white boy. They're playing a master and slave game, where the white boy is the master and the black boy plays the slave. The narrator is shocked because the black boy obeys all the commands and orders given by the white boy, even though the black boy is actually older than the white boy. The speaker starts feeling sorry for his own race, and he also feels that all black people, even kids, have sort of internalized a sense of inferiority. The entire day he is immersed in thoughts about his race and people belonging to it. The next day, however, things are reversed, and the narrator is surprised again because the boys are seen playing again, but this time the black boy is the master and the white boy the slave. At the same time, the narrator also finds a white man standing in his porch and observing the two boys. Now the narrator feels that the white man might be wondering why this white boy is listening to all the orders or obeying all the orders of the black boy. In order to justify this, the narrator walks over to the white man and he explains that the kids are just playing a game which they play on alternate days. The white man smiles and informs him that these two boys are his kids and that he was married to a black Jamaican woman, and that is why his sons are black and white. Now the entire story prompts the readers not to jump to conclusions. This personal essay also encourages us not to judge anyone or any incident based on our personal biases. It shows the result of ignorance and prejudices. So we come to the end of Jamaican Fragment. Now let's move on to Module 4, the marginalized and their rights. In this segment, we'll have 4 topics based on the marginalized people and their rights. The first one is the UN speech delivered by Malala Yousafzai on July 12, 2003, which was on her 16th birthday. The main focus or the main message conveyed by this speech is the importance of providing free and compulsory education for all people. While delivering the speech, Malala is wearing a shawl that belonged to Benazir Bhutto. Now this is important because Benazir Bhutto was the first woman Prime Minister of Pakistan and also the youngest Prime Minister to be elected in the whole world. Now Malala begins her speech in the name of the most beneficent and merciful God, and then she goes on to address all the dignitaries who are present at the UN meeting. Initially, her speech shows her gratitude and love towards all the people who had prayed for her recovery, for her speedy recovery. She then expresses her support to the UN Secretary General and the UN Special Envoy in their initiatives in the field of global education. She then states that Malala Day is not her day alone, but the day of all those people who have raised their voice for gaining their rights. She then narrates about the cruelties of the terrorist attack in Taliban, of which she herself was a victim. She expresses her wish to represent all the children and all those who have fought for their rights in the world. She further sheds light on the cruelties of Taliban. She says that Taliban probably assumed their bullet could silence her. But history itself is proof that guns can't kill the thirst for knowledge. And what the bullet actually did to her was that it took fear and hopelessness out of her heart. Other than that, nothing has changed. She is the exact same Malala, with the same ambitions and dreams. She states that she does not intend to take revenge upon the Taliban or any other terrorist group for that matter. Instead, she stresses on the importance of providing education for all of the children of all the terrorists, especially the Talibans. She says that she seeks no revenge against them because of the compassion that she learned from the Prophet Muhammad and Lord Buddha and Jesus Christ. She also states that it is important to follow principles of non-violence which were practiced by stalwarts like Gandhiji, Mother Teresa, and Nelson Mandela, etc. She further declares that she learned qualities of love and forgiveness from her parents and teachers. She continues her talk by emphasizing the power of books and education. She says that people in Pakistan realized the importance of books and poems when they saw the guns and points out the ever famous quote, "The pen is mightier than the sword." She then goes on to say that the Taliban's fear the change in quality education can produce in a society. And probably this is why they kill so many medical students, female teachers, etc. She further states that terrorists misuse the name of Islam because Islam is actually a religion of peace and it promotes humanity and brotherhood. At the end of her speech, she makes a request to all the world leaders to modify their strategic policies in order to ensure peace and prosperity in a country. She believes that all governments must ensure free and compulsory education for all children. She highlights the importance of initiatives to expand educational opportunities, especially for girls in developing countries. Now, she concludes her speech by reminding us about the importance of both education as well as peace. She considers knowledge, pen, and the book as the most powerful weapons. She states that it is our responsibility to fight against illiteracy, poverty, as well as terrorism. The final word she gives is that education is the only remedy in order to change and better the world. Now we'll move on to a poem, Caring for Animals by John Silkin. This was first published in the collection The Peaceable Kingdom in 1954. In this poem, Silkin asks the readers, is there a need to protect animals? Now he asks even the sky, the water, and even the entire universe the same question, but he does not get an answer from them. He does get an answer though from his own inner conscience. His own inner self makes him aware of the torments and sufferings that animals bear. The poet brings out the sufferings met by animals like dogs, cats, cart horses, and owls, as humans fail to protect them. Instead, man himself causes the suffering to these animals. The poem depicts what a wretched life animals lead under their so-called masters, that is, man. The poet reminds us of the importance of caring for and protecting even the tiniest of animals, And he ends the poem by stating that your love for fellow human beings also increases when your love and kindness towards animals grow. So, the basic message he puts forward is that human beings have a responsibility to protect all living beings and must develop a feeling of love and compassion towards fellow human beings as well. Next is a short story by Annie Taylor, and this short story was first published in the New Yorker in 1977. This short story is about how a mother deals with her mentally retarded child. The story begins with Bet, the mother, waking up in her one-room apartment and trying to get Arnold, her son, ready. She struggles to clothe him, she struggles to make him have his breakfast, and she starts wondering how she's going to handle him once he becomes older or bigger. There's no one to help her in such situations. Now she has decided to institutionalize him or admit him into a hospital for mentally retarded people. She feels that it is better for him and for her. And as they leave, Mrs. Puckett, who is their neighbor, who used to babysit Arnold, she comes over with cookies for Arnold. But Arnold doesn't even recognize her and he merely runs away. This leaves Mrs. Puckett in tears. Now, while she's taking Arnold to the hospital, they travel in a train, and Arnold is traveling in a train for the first time. So initially he is nervous, but then he calms down and sleeps. And it is while he sleeps that Avery starts thinking back about Arnold's childhood days. How her husband Avery left her just few weeks after Arnold was diagnosed with his mental disability. She regrets her marriage to him, which was done despite protest from her parents. She also recollects her childhood days when she was also someone like Arnold, who couldn't do anything as well as most people could. Now the significance of the title comes in here. Her father tries to teach her to body surf, but she just couldn't do it. She just stood in the water and let the waves crash against her. Now they finally reach the hospital and her train back is delayed by 20 minutes. She starts crying because she doesn't know how to spend the 20 minutes. But the mayor of the town comes in and starts delivering a speech. Now she is relieved. And she believes they've come to entertain her. She sits back and enjoys because her life is going to be like this now. She can now actually relax, watch and endure. She has chosen to become a mere observer of life rather than a participant. Next is a selection from an autobiography by Emmanuelle Labourette. Emmanuelle Labourette was a deaf French actress. Her hearing was impaired by birth. The Cry of the Gull is her autobiography, and what we have to study over here is just an excerpt from it. The excerpt given here is in the first person narrative. Now Labourette tells us of her childhood days, how her parents found out that she was deaf when she was just 9 months old. They hardly ever felt disheartened, though they were sad about it. The child's screaming was similar to the cries of a seagull, and that is why she was nicknamed Mouette or seagull in French. It is through her parents' love and support only that she was able to grow up like any other normal child. Labourette in this section appreciates and is grateful for the time and effort her parents gave her, and for accepting her with all her weaknesses and disabilities. We have now come to the end of Module 4. Thank you.